basically, the way I see it, we were having some issues with certain games. You would have noticed screen tearing in the visuals, and that's annoying. It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely annoying. This is the AverMedia GC553 Live Gamer Ultra device. So now I should have the absolute best experience playing every game.
Before we get into the clip, there's a bit of housekeeping that I would like to do. And the entirety of that housekeeping is apologizing for some of the audio mess-ups on the last video. The outro music came in a bit early, which was entirely my fault. My bad, I apologize. And during the latter half of the video, there was some sections where you could tell that the beginning of my sentences was being cut off and that DSP was running a bit over. I also want to apologize for that, but on my end in the editor, everything is aligned the way that it should be, so I'm not quite sure why that happened the way that it did. Regardless, I wanted to take the time to address it because it's definitely looking like amateur hour over here at Atlas Productions, and that's the last thing that I want. I also wanted to show off this new art. It's me, Atlas the Clip Keeper. Of course, it's big ups to Darksea to Phil again on this one. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. Not quite sure how I'm going to implement it yet, but I'm sure that I will. With that out of the way, let's get to the video that you actually clicked on this to hear.
Alrighty, everybody. So first of all, this is the reason why the podcast is starting a little late today. It looks like the camera's actually a little crooked, isn't it? I can't really tell. The reason that we started late today is because I'm trying new hardware. At this very moment, I'm actually using new hardware in order to do this stream. Although it's not affecting this portion, the podcast, it will be affecting the gameplay portion, just to jump over here and show you guys.
And before we look at whatever it is that he thinks that he's going to be showing us, you'll see why I say it like that in a minute. I'm failing to see right now exactly how receiving in a new capture card and setting it up made us late for the stream. I mean, all you have to do is unbox the thing and plug it in, because you know damn well that he didn't actually do any sort of test off stream. He's going to do all of that during the stream and waste everybody's time. So I ask again, exactly how did this make you late, DSP? What were you doing? And while we're talking about things that I fail to understand, exactly what does this actually have to do with the level 1 pre-stream, DSP? I only ask that because he's always insisting that the two should never mingle, the gameplay and the pre-stream. Yet here we are late to the pre-stream, which is completely separate from any sort of gameplay at all, and we're talking about and showing off a capture card. It is his content. He can obviously do whatever he wants whenever he wants because he's the boss of his own content. But if that's the case, and if you're gonna go off script the way that he is right now when it comes to this capture card debacle, then in the future I'm not interested in hearing about how you can't talk about certain topics during gameplay and you don't want to talk about certain gameplay during the pre-stream because it's unrelated.
So I know you guys can see this, right? So I got a question. Can you hear this? Can you guys hear that as I move around the menu? I hope your answer is yes. I'm going to see what people in the chat say. What you are seeing right there, okay, is a totally new capture device. I am not using my old one anymore, okay? You can hear it? Excellent. That is good news, okay?
And for all of my audio style listeners who didn't see the screen, yes, you absolutely just heard multiple pops from the Xbox dashboard. Not only is testing the capture card in this method a very huge waste of everybody's time, including your own, you should be insulted, but it also showcases how stupid or ignorant DSP is when it comes to his software. Because anybody familiar with OBS, even in the slightest, can tell you that there is all sorts of volume meters, indicators, and way to monitor the sound that is coming out of your stream, even when it's not live. So DSP absolutely could have done this little test that he just did right now in front of us all completely by himself. And while it was a very short test, it's yet another indicator that DSP just doesn't value anybody else's time.
So I have some really good news for everyone. First of all, what is being affected, I am now broadcasting and recording at a better bitrate. I used to do 12,000 kilobits per second. I have upped that to 15,000 kilobits per second. So there should be about a maybe roughly 20 to 25% increase in quality when you're watching, whether you're on stream or you're on demand. And the reason that I wanted to do that is because basically the way I see it, we were having some issues with certain games. So for example, when I would play Street Fighter 6, you would notice that there was a lot of pixelization sometimes in big movement. And actually people who have noticed this are people who were watching that head-to-head video that was made, me versus Brian, back on Friday Night Fights. In that head-to-head video, you will notice that Brian's visuals are much clearer than mine. And the question is why? Well, there could be many different reasons. It could be the capture device that we're using. It could be the bitrate. So I said, you know what? If you remember earlier this year, I actually separated the different processes that my computer's using. One process for streaming is using the CPU, and one process for recording is using my GPU. So since it split that amount of processing, at any time, I realized I can up the bitrate. So I did this morning, and we're going to test this today, and we're going to see how everything looks with the increased bitrate on stream and in the on-demand video. So no matter how you're watching, please today give me feedback on this podcast. Later when we do gameplay, I would love to hear your feedback on how everything looks and sounds, okay? We need to actually mess around with settings as well.
I'm not quite sure why, but DSP seems to have this strange obsession with upping his bitrate. So much so that back when he was on Twitch, it actually became a problem for him, where he was actively arguing with a Twitch staff member in his chat because he refused to lower his bitrate. And while having a higher bitrate absolutely does lead to a higher visual fidelity, it isn't necessarily the end-all be-all and isn't going to solve all of DSP's problems by simply increasing it. And after asking a couple of other content creators and knowing my own OBS settings, it's been made clear to me that the 12K bitrate that he already had is more than sufficient enough to do the task that he's asking it to do. And according to this random streaming bitrate calculator that I managed to find on the internet, 12K bitrate should even be capable of doing 1440p. So if DSP was actually looking to make an upgrade visually, he should already have been able to do that. The only legitimate reason I could see him increasing his bitrate at this point is if he's trying to make the jump up to 4K, which with his new capture card I'm absolutely certain he would be able to do. But if that's the case, then he's going to need to go up a lot higher than 15K. He's probably going to have to even double that in order to actually output 4K video. That being said, shout out obviously, his obsession with increasing his bitrate in order to solve any sort of visual inconsistencies on his stream is very strange to me. I'm just left wondering if this is yet another indicator that DSP doesn't actually understand any of the tools or software that he uses on a day-to-day basis, so much so that he thinks that simply increasing the bitrate is going to solve all of his problems.
Because whenever I mess with stuff, everything changes. And I guarantee you that perhaps the volume level needs to be tweaked with today, which is fine. Now, the big change is something completely unexpected. I never expected this, but get this. As you know, this week, there's been a lot of changes. I've been trying to figure out the best way to play Street Fighter 6. We figured out just a couple days ago that if I play it with the input latency reduction feature turned on, that now I can play the game with no input lag. I've played it twice since then, and I've absolutely loved my experience, okay? However, the problem is when I do that, it creates screen tearing. If you noticed in the videos of both E Honda from Monday and Dalsim from yesterday, you would have noticed screen tearing in the visuals. And that's annoying. It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely annoying. And other people don't have that. So, you know, how do you get around that? So a lot of people are like, well, if you had variable refresh rate enabled on your console, it fixes that. Well, guess what? My old capture device, which I used for about 1.5 years, was donated by a fan when my other old capture device died. That thing is kind of limited in what it can do. Although it does 4K pass-through, it can only do 1080p 60 frames. It doesn't support HDR. It doesn't support VRR. It doesn't support any of that modern stuff. Okay? So because of that, I couldn't do any of that stuff. So I'm like, I guess we're just going to be stuck where we are.
Then it sounds like, at least to me, that the hardware that you've been using, DSP, has been relatively insufficient when it comes to the quality that you want your streams to be. And while I'm sure that you're very appreciative to the fan that donated that capture card to you, it's time for you to upgrade, and unfortunately, you're gonna have to buy one, right?
Well, a viewer and fan of mine contacts me and says, Phil, I have a hunch. That since the AverMedia stuff works with your setup, that even though your PC is on Windows 8.1, I think that an AverMedia upgraded device would still work. Even though they claim on all their websites and documentation that you need Windows 10, I still think it'll work. So someone offered to donate me a new capture device to test. And if it doesn't work, no big deal. Just save it maybe for the future, for when I get a new PC or something like that. So I said, you know, hey, if you're willing to donate it, I'd be willing to try it. Listen, we're doing all kinds of good improvements this week. Right? So why not give it a shot and just see what happens? So they did, and it showed up this morning, and this is it. This is the AverMedia GC553 Live Gamer Ultra device.
So unfortunately, yet again, some dent got suckered into giving DSP more hardware that he absolutely should have bought for himself. And even more unfortunate than that, I have to admit that I misspoke in my last video, because I said that we had Iron Chef Sakai to thank for this new upgrade, and that was most definitely where the money came from in order to buy this. And for that, I apologize as well. I must have completely tuned this out when watching it. I should have known better than to actually assume that DSP purchased his own capture card for his own stream. You know, the thing that he gets paid to do? What a silly silly assumption to come to. I do find it very odd, however, that they had some weird hunch that simply because the capture card is the same brand, that DSP was going to be able to use the new one despite it saying that it had a requirement of a higher Windows version than he actually has. I just don't know how you come to that conclusion. I don't know how you get that hunch and how you are so confident on that hunch that you go as far as to buy the thing and have him try it out. But I guess as we all saw, or as some of us heard through the blips and bloops of the Xbox dashboard, it does in fact work.
Okay? It supposedly works on USB 3.1, which I don't even think I have. I think I have USB 3.0. I'm not sure. I mean, my PC's 10 years old. Was USB 3.1 even around back then? I don't know. Okay? This sucker is way more powerful than my previous capture device. So this one still does the 4K pass-through, but it also captures at 4K, if I so choose to do that. The catch is, it captures at 30 frames at 4K. So do we really want to go back to 30 frames per second gaming for the sake of doing 4K streams and videos? Probably not. Okay?
And I'm confused about this decision as well, because while I don't particularly care for resolution over frames per second anyway, DSP plays almost exclusively on console, where many of the games are locked at 30 FPS. So why wouldn't he go out of his way to get a better visual fidelity out of his capture card, at little to no cost to the actual experience? Because he's not going to be losing any frames. If this were any other streamer, I'd even go as far as to say that he could be changing it back and forth when it actually suits the situation. But even I know that that's far too much work for DSP and completely out of his wheelhouse. And I believe since he's discovered that these capture devices can do pass-through, he will be playing at 4K for his own sake. So isn't it a little inconsiderate on his behalf to not give his audience the exact same experience that he's having? And from everything that I've read online, uploading in 4K to YouTube actually means that it gets rendered in with a different codec, meaning that if he's actually looking for a better visual experience when it comes to his videos on YouTube, he absolutely should be uploading all of this in 4K. Of course, that's all just technicalities and nuance, none of which DSP clearly cares about.
Now, the catch, or the other cool thing about this one is that it does 1080p, get this, pass-through resolution up to 240 hertz, or that is 240 frames per second. Yeah, it does incredibly high hertz pass-through, okay? As for recording, it can actually record at up to 120 frames per second at 1080p. Okay? That's pretty crazy. It does 120 frames. So it's a big upgrade. All right, it is. It's a big upgrade from what I've been doing. So theoretically, this thing, if it works with my PC, okay, if everything, jives and we don't have any problems, I should be able to play games either at 4K 60 frames or 1080p 120 frames on my TV locally.
While it might seem that I interrupted him in the middle of a sentence and an incomplete thought, I want to assure everybody that I did not do that, and he's actually going to immediately follow this up with something almost completely unrelated. I did want to get in here and ask, however, what benefit is this going to be to your audience, DSP? Why does it matter if you're going to be playing at 4K 60 on your TV if your audience isn't going to see that? They're either not going to be seeing the 4K because you're not streaming it in 4K and it's going to be going through pass-through, or they're not going to be seeing the 60 FPS because most of the games that you're playing are only in 30. And if you continue with that train of logic, you only get led to the same question when it comes to streaming at 1080p at 120 FPS. What good is the extra 60 FPS that you're never going to see either, DSP? Because again, none of those console games are going to be running at 120 FPS. It's really cool that this device can do this. I just don't see how it's going to be utilized properly by DSP. And I just want to point out that obviously all of this could have been done through a proper PC streaming setup, something that DSP is vehemently dodging for some reason.
And chances are, since this is a more modern piece of hardware, I think this is only like a couple years old, actually. I have to look at the, how it has the years listed on it. I'm not sure how old of a piece of tech this is. 2023. It's only a year old. It's a 2023 device. Chances are the encoding on this thing is much better than that outdated device that I was using for a year and a half. That means that probably video is going to look much better for you guys. Like, it probably won't have as much pixelization to begin with. Okay? But the question is, will this work with my PC? Because it says right on it, Windows 10 required, USB 3.1 required. Well, guess what? It showed up this morning at 9 a.m. Now, I had to rush around my house to get everything done this morning and get in the office and mess with this. Okay?
Rush around the house, DSP. What are you doing for 2 hours before your stream starts? I mean, I know what the answer is. You're pulling Hogan's and wasting a bunch of time because you are incapable of actually spending any of your time wisely. But I thought that 9 a.m. was the time that he claims to be waking up every single day. So if the package showed up as soon as you arrived, I would imagine that all of the normal things that a normal style person does when they first wake up, things like eating, drinking their coffee, taking a shower, brushing their teeth, could and absolutely should be all done within the hour. Which, if my math has mathed out correctly, leaves you an entire hour to set this up before the stream. So why did we have to test this out with the audience? And I just want to tell you right now that he continues to test the card throughout the pre-stream by playing multiple matches of Street Fighter 6, which I want to remind you was supposed to be completely separate from the pre-stream. So for anybody who was unwilling to agree with me earlier when I said that the Xbox main menu test should have been performed off stream, you have to be willing to agree with me now that he absolutely should not have been playing multiple Street Fighter 6 matches in order to test this out during the pre-stream. For a guy who's so scheduled and regimented, he's completely off the rails on this one.
Guess what? It works. It works fine. It really does. So let's take a look, okay? Here it is. And as you can see, guess what? HDR is enabled. This is HDR quality right now, which is why it actually looks like a nice, deep, darker, blacks on the screen. It actually has it enabled. No filter required. It just works with HDR out of the box through my console. The console auto-detected it and said, oh yeah, HDR enabled. I was like, holy shit, that's cool. So basically what we have here, you guys are seeing 1080p 60 frames per second HDR enabled video at 15,000 kilobits per second. Okay? I am able to see 120 hertz. I'm actually watching 120p right now on my TV. Now, am I necessarily seeing much difference? Not really. But I mean, we're not playing a game. Once we jump into a game, maybe I would actually notice the difference. I'm not sure. I've never used 120 hertz before, so I don't even know what I'm going to see as a difference. We won't know till we play a game.
If there's no visual indication of the upgrades that you've made, DSP, then why are you continuing to show your audience this boring-ass Xbox screen? Why don't you just actually wait until you get into the gameplay to show people what you're talking about and look at any of the improvements that you're insisting exist? You just sound silly talking about 120 hertz while looking at the main menu of the Xbox dashboard. Can you imagine any other content creator trying to show off the upgrades that they've made to their stream at the Xbox Live dashboard instead of actually playing the video games? The things that you go to their streams to see.
So this is going to be an interesting experiment today. Today we're playing Multiverses and we're playing Hades 2. And yeah, I'm going to try to run both at the 120 hertz 1080p and see how they work, Now, here's the catch about this, though, is that Street Fighter 6 doesn't run at 120 hertz, okay? They actually limit it to 60 frames. But if you play it at 120 hertz, supposedly it lowers your input delay, okay? So what I want to test today, which we're going to test live on this podcast, I am re-downloading Street Fighter 6 to my Xbox, and I want to play it at 120 hertz on my TV, but I want to see if it reduces the input delay, okay? If it doesn't, I want to see what happens if I do that input delay option again, and see what happens on the Xbox version. I'm just curious, comparing Xbox versus PS5, if I can get a version to not have the screen tearing, but also have reduced input delay. That's the best of both worlds, and that's what I'm going for. This capture device has everything enabled, right? I can do the 120 frames, so maybe we're going to actually be in a situation where this is going to run better. I don't know, okay?
And while all of that might seem fine and dandy, the result of all of this is going to be inconclusive at best because he's not actually going to be running any sort of test that he can look at statistics on. He's going to have no numbers. He's going to have actually nothing objective to base any of this on. The entire test is going to be based solely off of how he feels. It's all going to be subjective, so it's going to be worthless. He's spending all of this time hyping it up, and he's going to spend X amount of time actually testing it in a very subjective way. When the reality is, it would have been far easier and more conclusive if he would have just looked up some sort of test online and watched a YouTube video. Then he would have had a concrete answer on exactly whether or not it was going to make a difference to him. But this is DSP Space Gaming that we're talking about. We're not interested in numbers over here. We're not interested in actually understanding anything objectively. It's all about how DSP feels and when he feels it. And of course, it has to stay that way simply so that he can change the narrative whenever he deems it necessary.
Now, the only other variable here, so we have HDR enabled. We have 120 hertz enabled. This is all good improvements. But what about VRR? I don't think Xbox has it, does it? Because I look in the Xbox menu, it doesn't mention it anywhere. Okay, in fact, I can read it for you word for word. I will actually. Let's do that. So I go into TV and display options. I'm going to show you what I'm looking at. All right.
And I'm going to do us all the favor of just going ahead and jumping to the point where he finds the VRR setting in the Xbox, because it absolutely has it.
Oh, look, variable refresh rate off. It's not even selectable. You see that? It's not selectable. So maybe it's saying that I don't have it. I don't know. I don't know if this TV has VRR. I actually have no clue. I know it had HDR, but I wasn't looking for VRR when I bought this TV like 2 years ago. So maybe the TV doesn't have VRR. Okay, if that's the case, then there's nothing I can do about it. But as you can see, it's grayed out.
And while I thought that I had a clip of him explicitly stating that his TV most definitely does have VRR because it's a high-end mid-tier Sony style television, I apparently do not. So hopefully you'll just take me at my word and accept the fact that he did in fact say this, and that his confidence is now wavering because he's unsure whether or not his TV does in fact have the features that he said it did.
So I don't think it's detecting it. Okay. Anyway, you have to turn it on from the TV. Yeah, but how? Like, every TV's different, right? I don't know how to do that. I don't see anything in my TV settings that say anything about VRR anywhere. Like, I go into, let's see here. I'm looking at all my TV settings. You guys can't see my TV settings, okay? Here, I'll go back to my full screen. Here we go. Yeah, I'm going through my TV settings right now. I see nothing at all. Like, there's picture modes, but that's just like gaming and stuff like that. When you go into picture settings, all it says is gaming, and then it has auto picture mode, brightness, color, clarity, motion, video signal. None of that says VRR. In any menu, there's no VRR listed.
And some of you might be asking at this point, are we seriously listening to a 42-year-old man live on stream mess with his TV settings? And if we are, Atlas, why have you not cut this section out of the video? Surely there's nothing to be gained from watching this. And while I agree, this is kind of absurd and usually something I would cut out, I do want to give a general idea of what a DSP stream typically looks like for anybody who doesn't actually watch the raw streams. Because I think that often when people watch DSP through channels like mine or through clip channels, they either don't understand or completely forget how excruciating the actual raw experience can be. We all know that he wastes time on his pre-stream to pad the length, often doing so by talking about nonsensical topics or excruciatingly long sentences that lead nowhere. But sometimes it's things like this, and I think that things like this are so much worse. It is quite literally the definition of non-tech. You could get the same experience by buying your grandparents a new television and then asking them to do all of the setup when you plug it in, which only leaves me wondering who exactly is an unironic fan of this, who is giving this man money, who actually supports him making this style of content.
So, and then if I go into general settings, channels and inputs, display and sound, network and internet, yeah, I don't know. I don't see anything about VRR in the TV at all. You know, it's a Sony TV. People know the model because I talked about it earlier. Channels and inputs, external. My Ruin is looking it up. Okay, external inputs. External device setup, manage inputs. Okay. How would I do HDMI signal format? Okay. It says enhanced format. Oh, VRR. Select this option only if your game console supports VRR. I selected it. Oh boy. I might have it. I just turned it on.
And we couldn't even navigate our TV settings without giving some sort of alien reaction to everything we're doing, announcing to the audience that we've selected an option, and even going as far as to say, oh no, I might have it when enabling VRR, as if there was any sort of question left in his mind after he specifically said that he hit the option to enable it.
Okay, I just enabled it. We're gonna see what happens now. It's on! Holy shit, it's on. It worked. Thank you, My Ruin. My Ruin looked up my TV settings and found it. Holy shit, so now I have VRR. Oh my god, this is going to be the biggest upgrade ever.
Because it wasn't enough that a dent gave DSP a brand new capture card for him to use on his streams. No, a different dent, or at least I'm assuming that it's a different dent, also had to help DSP navigate his TV menus. I really just don't understand how you get to this point in your content creation career where you're having your audience actually walk you through and handhold you through TV menus. A TV, might I add, that he's had for over 2 years now. You would think that he would be more than familiar with all of the settings on his TV, that he would have gone through all of these menus and had to look through after the initial setup to verify that it was going to work as optimally as possible with his setup and stream. Yet here we find ourselves watching a 42-year-old man turn on variable refresh rate on his TV.
So I literally just went from 1080p 60 frames, no features, to 1080p 120 hertz, 120 frames, HDR, VRR enabled. Holy shit. Thank you, my ruined. You are awesome. Thank you for looking that up. Wow. I have variable refresh rate. So now I should have the absolute best experience playing every game.
I don't think that I have to tell you how false that statement is, not only on an objective standpoint, because there are still going to be PC players who are having an objectively better experience than DSP because their hardware just runs the game better, but even in a very subjective way, it's a very loaded statement to say that you're going to have the best experience playing every single video game now, as if turning on the HDR and VRR settings in your console is going to instantly upgrade your experience.
I should have the least input delay. I should have ultra good response time, right? And we're going to test it. Oh, we're going to test it right now, folks. By the way, today is Wednesday, the 29th of May, 2024. Sorry that we're 15 minutes into the show and I didn't even announce the date yet. If you can't tell, I'm a little excited about this. Street Fighter 6 is still downloading. I'm going to have it fully download and then I'm going to test it. Because I'm curious, with variable refresh rate, we may be able to play it either on Xbox or PlayStation 5 and have no screen tearing and no input delay. This is going to be crazy, man. I'm so excited. And every game moving forward, I can play at 120 frames per second.
And it's at this point that I've realized that I don't think that DSP actually understands the difference between 120 Hz and 120 FPS, because he absolutely will not be able to play every single game at 120 frames per second. That's not how this works. And I'm not even just talking about the games that are exclusively locked at 60 FPS like Street Fighter 6. I'm talking about pretty much every single game that he's going to be playing on a console, because even in the games that technically have an uncapped frame rate, how often are these consoles going to be capable of hitting 120 FPS in a game? My guess is not often, if ever. I think that the only time that he's actually going to see any sort of benefit from the increased refresh rate is when he plays games on his mini PC. And we all know that he wants to use that device as little as possible.
And if I want to, I can actually capture it and broadcast it at 120 frames per second. Now, the catch is, I don't know how well YouTube's going to do that, how well YouTube would even implement that. You know, I have no clue. I mean, you're doubling the frame rate. That means that it might take double the processing. So it may not work well, and it might destroy my CPU, and I might not be able to do it. Like right now, okay, with this podcast, broadcasting and recording at each video at 15,000 kilobits per second, I'm using 36% of my CPU, which means I'm probably using the same thing on my GPU. If I did 120 hertz, 120 frames, it would probably double that. So I'd be pushing 70, 80% on each all the time.
For clarification purposes, I don't believe that currently YouTube supports any sort of videos higher than 60 FPS. I also want to clarify for anybody who doesn't know, all of the numbers that DSP is currently stating are completely pulled out of his ass, and he has no idea what he's talking about, even though he could actually go and look at the numbers right now. What I do find actually interesting is this person in chat named Abu, who currently has a chat on screen saying, "I hope Jasper doesn't look at that screen during that 120 FPS," which I just find really amusing because I thought it was so absurd when DSP previously stated that the 60 FPS was causing Jasper to go haywire in his office, as if cats just have some sort of weird reaction to a higher refresh rate.
How long did I have this TV? About a year and a half. It was late 2022. I think the last one died, and that's when I got this one. Yep.
Damn, earlier I said that he's had that TV for a little over 2 years. I guess I got debunked live, but I'm leaving it in. If I'm wrong, stupid.
That is true. Avarice says not many games other than shooters would even have 120 frames. You're right. Oh, man. So anyway, once Street Fighter 6 finishes fully downloading here, we're going to test it live. We're going to test it and see if it runs with the VRR, and we're going to see what my input delay is like. But I got to plug my old joystick back in. I haven't used that joystick since last year when we were playing it on Xbox. So that's right. You were helping me choose a model of TV. We were looking at all these different ones, and I got a good Sony. This Sony, like I said, this Sony TV supports everything. HDR, VRR, like it supports every feature.
You didn't seem too confident in that statement earlier, DSP, when you were looking for the VRR setting. You even went as far as to say that you don't think that it was capable because you didn't see it.
Oh, did it finish? I think it actually just finished. So, try Call of Duty. I don't want to play Call of Duty. The new Call of Duty I'll play. I don't want to play the old Call of Duty on here. I had enough of that. We're playing Multiverses. I wonder what Multiverses is at, right? I don't know. You think YouTube caps at 60 frames? Is that true? YouTube does not support higher than 60 frames? I don't know about that.
Well, if you don't know about that, DSP, then just look it up like everybody else, or just believe the person in chat who is supposedly trying to help you. I'll never understand his refusal to actually just search something for himself, and then when somebody inevitably comes in his chat to give him the answer that they obviously looked up themselves, he doesn't believe them. Why even go out of your way to try and help this guy? It's a waste of everybody's time.
But here's the weirdest thing about all of this, okay? This device claims you need Windows 10 and USB 3.1. I'm running on Windows 8.1 and probably like just USB 3.0, and it's working fine. So why does it say that crap, right? Why? So they're full of it, probably because they're trying to cover their own butts, so that they, you know, oh, be sure you have everything you really need, but you don't need it. It's just weird that it works like no problem. I mean, I didn't have to do nothing. I just plugged it in and it's working.
I mean, there really is a myriad of reasons as to why they would claim that you have to have that version of Windows at least in order to use this device. And a lot of those reasons might be behind the scenes. Maybe having an improper version of Windows, one lower than one that they would recommend, might lead to some sort of inefficiency in the device. I just hope that later down the road in the DSP timeline, that we get a capture device arc where all of a sudden the capture device is no longer working and we don't know what's going on and we have to do a troubleshooting style stream in order to figure it out. And the answer the entire time is the fact that DSP has an outdated OS that he refuses to upgrade, and went out of his way to use a capture device that explicitly stated that on the box.
Multiverses runs on 120 on PC. Oh, that's interesting. All right, I want to do a test live here on the show. I do. I want to see what happens with Street Fighter 6. I know this is unprecedented. I usually would not have a game for the podcast, but I mean, I'm dying to test this. I don't want to cut into our Multiverses time. Okay, so let me actually dust off my my joystick's been sitting here for a while. I need to clean it. I'm going to plug it in to my Xbox, and I'm going to see how this game runs on Xbox. In this case, it won't even matter like what version I play at this point. You know, what's up, Jade? How you doing? So let's test this, okay? Here it is, the old joystick. This is the Hori Fighting Stick Alpha that I was using on my Xbox for a couple of years, anticipating Street Fighter 6. We used this all the way through until like the fall, and that's when I started playing on PS5. So real fast, I'm just gonna run and get some cleaner, and I'm going to wipe the top off because it's really dusty. And then we're gonna test out Street Fighter 6 now running at 120 hertz. Someone said in chat, running Street Fighter 6 at 120 hertz should theoretically lower my input delay by half. So we'll see. All right, get 1 sec, guys. I'm just gonna go grab cleaner. I'll be right back.
And it was at this point that DSP actually decided to clean his joystick live on stream, as if he hadn't wasted enough time. And that wasn't meant to be an innuendo, I promise. And during this cleaning session, he said that there was some sort of goop that was on the stick. I have no idea how you got goop on your fighting stick as it sat dormant on the shelf. But hey, that's probably more information than I actually want to know. And like I said earlier in this video, I'm not actually going to show off DSP's Street Fighter 6 gameplay during this test. It was very boring, and the conclusion was that the screen tearing was gone. Very cool, very robust. Just like all of the people that watched this video, especially if you made it this far. So hopefully I'll catch all of you guys in the next video, but until then, make sure that you check out other detractor content and dive deeper into that. Snortex.